So good morning, everyone. I'll try to provide a quick overview of the methodology working group that was taking place yesterday. And we had 3 presentations in the session. We had a lot of interested participants, so it was a very large group, much larger than I expected, I must admit. And we had one presentation from Edouard Faudrin from ADEME in France, who introduced the French methodology framework, and many of you know it already. Also heard the presentation by Sylvain Chevassus yesterday, and we could see, and I think it was important to have that presentation to see how the work around the methodological framework is evolving. We had a second presentation by Rana Pant from the Joint Research Center with the European Commission, who introduced some technical specifications of the environmental footprinting methodology that is currently developed in the EU. And we had a presentation by Georg Schöner from the Sustainability Consortium to also introduce the system that is currently developed by the Sustainability Consortium. And what I would like to do very quickly is just give you a glimpse of just some slides that they have shown that kind of give you a feeling of the level of discussion, or like what was discussed. In the presentation by Edouard, which was, by the way, a recorded presentation, so with like no carbon emissions emitted for traveling at least, and obviously because they are very busy in their work in the French environmental footprinting work. And one of the points that he touched upon is how they are revising the system on the go, because they obviously have a very tough timeline to meet. They have developed a lot of framework methodologies in the past, and now currently in an experimentation phase that we learned about yesterday, and we'll understand a bit better also from Olivier Jan, I think in a second, how that is evolving, but that's also influencing back on the methodology work. So a revised version of the methodological framework in France was published, I think it was earlier this year, and he introduced some of the issues that they considered there. In the presentation by Rana Pant from the Joint Research Center, which was a very, I think, elaborate introduction to really some of the thinking behind developing such a methodology, and with some technical details on some points. And what I found remarkable is one choice that they made early on to narrow subjective choices that can be made in any ecological footprint assessment to cater for more comparability, and also to make the methodology work for different applications. So the methodology that they're aiming at seems to be much more specific than many of the global frameworks that we're currently talking about. They're still considering product category rules as a very important element, but try to go as far as possible already with the general methodology as possible in providing predefined choices to limit kind of the gaming possibilities and the choice possibilities that you have when you apply this methodology. And this is for several reasons. One is comparability in the end, but also another reason which drives that development is ease of use, cost and effort involved in application. The less choices you have to make in implementing and using such a methodology, the easier it actually gets to then work with it on different levels. And they are also already thinking about a lot of the framework tools, databases, and so on that are implemented together with that methodology. And something similar is also taking place within the Sustainability Consortium, which is such a comprehensive set of tools developed that it is really not possible for me to summarize it in a couple of words. And I really encourage you to also approach the representatives of these organizations that are with us today, and also I think can also be reached via email and other means. And the Sustainability Consortium also aims at a more comprehensive system to really streamline application of these sustainability measurements. And so it's also not just about environmental assessments, but also about social assessment, social impacts, but also about communication formats that maybe or can be built up on later on in different ways. And just to illustrate kind of the thinking, how it's done, and this is just part of it, but what you can see is that it's much more than just a methodology, but it's really a process thinking behind it, like what data needs to be aggregated at what level, who needs to do it, who can see it, who not, where do we need to have like firewalls in place, where do we need like more simplified information brought to several levels, and that kind of gives you an idea where, like, how these issues or these methodology developments are currently approached. And conclusions that I drew from the session, and I think it would be good to also share with other participants, or if somebody really wants to add something that they found valuable of the session, then please do that also quickly. For me, it was interesting to see that, I mean, we know about LCA approaches that have been applied in the past, like general standards and frameworks for doing these assessments, and we still very heavily build up on these, but we are now seeing more ambitious systems approaches emerging that build infrastructure around these standards, the underlying tools, databases, data sets that need to be implemented in these tools to actually make it work for not just a small group of experts for like certain individual cases in application, but like a larger range of applications, a larger range of users, and also making possible information that is coming from these systems more broadly available. Whatever the specific application may be in the end, I think all these still leave that open, except for the French system, perhaps, where we already have like a very clear communication component. In the discussion afterwards, which I think could have been much longer, given the level of details and interest that was in the group, I kind of had the feeling there were a lot of questions around the process in developing these tools and methodologies, who is involved, who not, and this is of course also a question of speed, like the more people you involve, the slower you usually get. And also the question is kind of who, with what aim are these methodologies developed, and when is it kind of open for consultation, who is then informed, and so on. And these were questions that I think were discussed in the group and also considered, but also I think interesting to understand why, for example, the European Union is kind of now taking this very bold approach of doing it very fast and only opening it later up for more public comment. And I think there was kind of an understanding that there's always a trade-off involved, like also in doing a very broad consultation that may in the end not cater for the purpose that you were trying to achieve in the beginning. And this, I think, was discussed on different levels. There were, of course, some more questions. But I also invite you or encourage you to take a look at the detailed presentations which are in the knowledge base. I think one is still missing, which we will upload later on, and you will find much more detailed information in these presentations. So thank you very much. If we have time, I can take 1 or 2 questions or invite participants to also add from their point of view what they found insightful in the session.
So, thank you. My name's Tom. I run a company called Savage & Hall. We do recruitment and search. And I just wanted to say that thank you, everybody, for being so nice to me. Normally, I go to conferences and people avoid me because they think, oh, if my colleagues see me talking to him, then I'm obviously after a job. So you guys have all been very friendly and coming up to me. And then in the other conferences I go to, sometimes normally people go, Tom, can you meet me in 5 minutes? I need to chat. So anyway, you've been very open and nice. And the reason why I came to Thema 1 and was asked to come was that I felt, from my bird's eye view I get talking to a lot of people in sustainability on boards, that there isn't really enough of a thought about the talent piece in the various markets in sustainability. So rather than come and just chat to people, I wanted to try and get a snapshot of what was going on in the market. And I asked 2 questions. Firstly, where is the talent market at the moment within this space? And what are the kind of things that need to be put in place in order to help meet those talent demands as we roll forward? And just a couple of observations before I get on to what we talked about. First of all, I think the interesting piece was that people hadn't really thought about it at all. We started off quite slowly, and people were like, talent? I'm not sure how this fits into this particular argument. And as we got in, we started talking more and more, and it became a much more lively session. I mean, that goes again to my point, which I was making, is I only really get spoken to when people are desperate and already looking. And I think one of the key pieces is that everybody was talking about being more proactive in the space. And then the last point was, there was a kind of comment that everybody is talking about very technical matters and very detailed matters, but actually the softer kind of pieces around it. We had more of a therapy session where people kind of shared thoughts and ideas, and that felt like something that was quite interesting. So back to my 2 questions: where is the talent market, and what needs to be put in place to meet future demands? And these were what people talked about. First of all, within where is the talent market at the moment, they said they needed more people with leadership skills and more people with big picture skills. So a lot of people had very good ideas but were quite narrow-minded about where they wanted to be. And so there was an ask that somehow we managed to do some training or leadership skills about the much bigger pieces. And there was a lack of balance. There was a lot of technical people, but one thing that kept coming up was communication. There was not enough people who were able to communicate things properly. And people who can bring out the synergy. And once again, the market is very specialized and quite reactive and defensive rather than proactive in terms of kind of getting out there and broadening. And then what needs to be put in place? We kept coming up with creating more space for discussion on talent needs. So once I'd kind of broken through to people that this was an important idea, everybody said, we should talk about this more. This is a really good idea. So that came out of the session. One of the other ideas was making ourselves available to each other in the network to talk about the talent piece. So an idea that came up is 1, 3, 6 months after this session, you can pick up the phone to another person who attended the conference and say, hey, how's it going? How's this piece coming along for you? And creating more of a kind of between the conference discussion. One of the big pieces that came up inevitably with talent was that there needed to be more training opportunities on footprinting. And again, going back to the broadening side, that was much more for non-experts than for experts. So training for people who don't understand a lot of the quite detailed things that have been talked about the last couple of days. And that fits into a kind of word that came up, which was demystification, which was really important. The other thing was integrating sustainability staff into the core business opportunities. So we had some people who had experience of integrating, and that was working very well, but a lot of people said they were quite siloed. And then the last piece, maybe I raised this, was the idea that when you have a hiring need, when you've decided that you want somebody, normally you hand that over to an HR department who then don't know half of the details and the characteristics of the people that you are talking to, which makes it very difficult for them to make those hires. So it should be something that people do themselves when they want to add people to their team. Yeah, and so I think in summary, there was this idea that people were somewhat defensive, somewhat in their own little areas, and there was a feeling that people wanted to talk about it more often. So we had a good session, and a bit like you, Rasmus, we got to the stage where we were eating into the break, and we could have gone on a long time. So thank you for the people who came and got involved and added to the discussion. It was really interesting. And if anybody has any questions, feel free to ask.
Hello, good morning. I was in the communication track, and sorry for the terrible voice I have this morning. We started by a deeper view at several case studies we have at the moment in the French experimentation, the idea being to show what were the really diverse choices that had been made by the French companies in terms of communication format, and which would be the environmental indicators we would communicate on and how we would communicate. Just to give an example, there's probably, I didn't expect to reach such number, but 12 different ways of presenting the carbon footprint of a product that you will find inside the case studies we have at the moment. And we also took the opportunity to present what could be the very preliminary learnings we have from the experimentation, even though it is quite new. And to make it short, we can see that there's definitely a consumer interest, that it's positive for the brand image of the company who took this initiative. But when it comes to multi-criteria environmental assessments, roughly there's only 20% of the people who will say, okay, I understand what it means and what's behind. So obviously there's a huge pedagogical effort to be carried out for probably many years from now. On the supplier side, most of the positive learnings have come from the existence of a very positive communication between, for example, retailers and suppliers, or suppliers of their suppliers. And this environmental footprint initiative has led companies to kind of reconnect with the different steps of their supply chain, and this has created some positive value within this supply chain, and of course with the objective of reducing the carbon footprint of products. And finally, a couple of companies have already identified the importance also of engaging internal teams for such an initiative to be successful. And there are two categories of people, especially in the organization, which are key to the success. On one side, the procurement team, especially with distant suppliers, because they are the daily interface with suppliers, so they will need to explain what's the objective of such a labeling initiative. On the other side, it is the sales side of the companies, people who are in contact with consumers and who should be able also to promote the initiative of the company and even to support the sale of so-called green products. Then in the second presentation with Marc Voinson from Casino, we had an exhaustive presentation of the Casino case study, Casino being the first company in France to start with carbon labeling 4 years ago. And Casino especially made two strong choices on this experiment. The first one, Casino said, okay, we want to give a unique figure to consumers because we want the message to be simple, to be easy to understand. So they took the risk to do something that LCA practitioners generally are not comfortable with. It is aggregating environmental indicators. And the second thing that they've done is that they say, okay, we want the consumer to be able to understand what is the scale of this figure we will communicate. So we've established some kind of environmental daily budget of a French consumer, and we give a figure which is the share, the percentage of portion of a specific product compared to this daily budget, so that the consumer has an order of magnitude of the impact of what is buying. And you'll find in the documents which are at the bottom of the room a presentation of the environmental index of Casino, and of course you can already upload the presentation that Marc made. Then we had a presentation from Thomas Albisser from Opcube. They developed an environmental footprint methodology, but especially some information systems that you are able to put on typical merchandising platform. And the advantage is they've been able already to capture a lot of information on consumer behavior, because they know obviously how the consumer will navigate to the website, whether he will click or not to get some more environmental information based on the small logo you could find. And it's interesting to see, for example, that the more green the product will be on the website, the more information the consumer will try to find, like really to establish whether this is really true that this product is better than another. And then we had a very lively presentation from Stephen Gentis on something I was absolutely not familiar with, which is how you will shoot TV advertisements. And he explained to us that with constraints of timing, suddenly at a certain period in time, you will have an order to shoot an advertisement with such a weather, such a landscape, and that means you have to go to South Africa or New Zealand, because it's the only place in the world at this period of the year where you will find the right conditions. So that means a lot of people flying, a lot of material flying, and once you're there, you'll make extensive use of helicopters to do some fantastic shootings that we'll see on the TV afterwards. So it's pretty much energy consuming process. And so he developed a calculation tool to help people within this ecosystem to understand where were the issues and what were the advantages in kind of sometimes anticipating how things could be done. And finally, we finished with a video presentation from US, which was on the Good Guide program, which is quite an extensive assessment methodology that's been developed and that you can access from your mobile phone, for example, when you go shopping, just using the reference of the product. So you can find all presentations in the usual place, except mine that I will make available within 2 hours, probably. And as I mentioned, you will have also some more information on the casino environmental index in the documents over there.